Welcome back to another Qiskit video. In this video, I want to go over some math fundamentals that I've found useful in my quantum computing journey. If you have a background in math, you probably already know this, but I still recommend that you watch this video even just as a refresher. And if you don't know it, then hopefully this will give you the basics that you'll need for coding with Qiskit or on your quantum computing journey in general. First thing I want to go over is the sinusoidal functions. So for me, I learned this in grade 11, but of course forgot by the time I was trying to do quantum again. These tables will help us later in our calculations, so I recommend before you do any calculations, you write out this table or at least have it memorized. A good way to memorize it is knowing the shape of cos and sine, and then the table should be relatively easy to figure out. These come in handy when we use our axis rotations, which you will be asked to calculate. And we have the x-axis rotation, the y-axis rotation, and the z-axis rotation on our block sphere. So I'll go over at the end of this how to calculate rotations around the axis using these matrices. And again, these are some things that you will need to commit to memory. Let's do a calculation together. If you've done the Qiskit sample test, you've probably seen a question similar to this, though we can use Qiskit to calculate it. On an exam, you will need to be able to do the calculations. Now, given the code, what is the probability of measuring 1? Where the code is a rotation of pi over 2 around the x-axis. So first of all, we know we're starting in 0 in all our Qiskit circuits unless otherwise specified. And 0 is that vector there with the 1 on top. And remember, the 1 vector just switches those around. We also know our rotation around the y-axis, or if you're like me, you can look it up. Even though you just wrote it, you forgot it. So our angle is pi over 2, which was specified in the code. And we know cos of pi over 2 because of that first that we know. So whenever I do a math question, the first thing that I like to have is our givens, which I get from the question. And the knowns are things that I have memorized on the back of that page there. Finally, the last step that I do in any math problem is I calculate it. So given the code, rotation over the y-axis, and we apply that to our starting state 0, which is the vector 1, 0. Then we can just go ahead, do those calculations, And we should end up with a vector. The absolute value of cos pi over 4 is going to be the probability of measuring 0, and sine pi over 4, that absolute value, is going to be our probability of measuring 1. For this, our absolute value is just to square sine pi over 4, which, using that table, we know to be a half. So since the probability of measurement adds up to 1, or 100%, probability is 50-50.